Little Rascals were the most famous children in America. Millions watched them laugh, fight, and play on screen like nothing could ever go wrong. But behind those cameras, something else was happening. One was shot dead over $50. Another was found alone in a hotel room with no one to claim the body. One died at 16 from a scooter his parents had just given him. And the kid everyone loved most spent 20 years addicted to heroin after being introduced to it in jail. The Little Rascals made the whole world smile. What happened to them after the cameras stopped will make you sick. George Robert Phillips McFarland, known to the world as Spanky, was born on October 2, 1928, in Dallas, Texas, and his life in pictures began almost by accident. In 1931, his aunt mailed his photo to Hal Roach Studios after seeing a trade magazine ad asking for cute kids, and that small decision changed everything. He went on to appear in 95 Our Gang shorts over the next 13 years, which was longer than any other cast member. His first contract gave him $75 a week for 5 years, an enormous amount during the Depression, and by the time MGM signed him again in 1938, he was earning $1,500 a week. For a child, it was a dream life. Then, one day, it stopped. At 14, Spanky looked at his parents and said, plain and simple, "I'm tired of it." He walked away from acting, but acting never really let go of him. Hollywood had already locked him into one image, and no matter how much time passed, the industry could not see anything else. So the boy who had once been one of the most famous children in America found himself working at a soft drink plant, a hamburger stand, a popsicle factory, and a gas station. He later opened a barbecue restaurant in Oklahoma City, and even made his own steak sauce. Stability did not come until 1966, when he became a sales executive at Philco Ford, and later Magic Chef. He stayed in corporate sales for 29 years, far longer than he had ever stayed in films. Looking back, he summed it up with the kind of honesty only age can bring. He said he would not take $1 million for the experience, and he would not take a penny to do it again. On June 30th, 1993, he suffered a fatal heart attack in Grapevine, Texas, at the age of 64. There was one last cruel twist. His wife had been secretly arranging a star for him on the Hollywood Walk of Fame as a surprise. But he died before he ever knew. The star was unveiled after his death on February 1st, 1994. If Spanky's story carries a quiet sadness, Carl Dean Switzer's story hits like a thunderclap. Born on August 7, 1927, in Paris, Illinois, Carl became alfalfa in the most unlikely way. In 1934, he and his brother Harold were at the Our Gang Cafe, the studio commissary that was open to the public, when they broke into an impromptu song and dance routine. Hal Roach saw them and signed both boys on the spot. Carl began at $50 a week and eventually made $275 at his peak. Between 1935 and 1940, he appeared in 61 shorts, and by 1937, he had become so popular that he even passed Spanky as the most beloved rascal. But childhood fame rarely promises adulthood security, and for Carl, it certainly did not. He left the series at 12 and picked up scattered film work after that, but only in small bits and pieces. He had an uncredited role as Donna Reed's date in It's a Wonderful Life in 1946, and another uncredited part as a slave in The Ten Commandments in 1956. Yet those roles never led anywhere solid. Most of the time he scraped by. He worked as a bartender at Wolf's Den in Studio City, a hunting guide, and a dog breeder whose clients included Jimmy Stewart and Roy Rogers. Trouble seemed to follow him too easily. In December 1958, he was arrested for illegally cutting down 15 pine trees in Sequoia National Forest so he could sell them as Christmas trees. He received a year of probation and a $225 fine. Before that, he had married heiress Deantha Collingwood in 1954 after just 3 months of dating. They had a son, Justin Lance, in 1956 and divorced the very next year. Then, in January 1958, someone shot him in the arm. The gunman was never identified, and the mystery was never solved. Still, none of that would become the darkest chapter. That came on the evening of January 21st, 1959. Switzer and his friend, Jack Piot, a 37-year-old studio photographer, drove to 10400 Columbus Avenue in Mission Hills, California, where Moses Bud Stilts, a 38-year-old welder, lived. The whole confrontation came down to $50. Switzer had borrowed Stilts' hunting dog and then lost it. Trying to fix the mess, he placed a newspaper ad offering a $35 reward. And when the dog was found, He also bought the finder about $15 worth of drinks. That added up to $50, and Switzer believed Stilts owed him the money. Both Switzer and Piot had been drinking when they arrived. To get inside, Switzer jokingly announced himself as Western Union for Bud Stilts. Once the door opened, the joking stopped. He demanded the money, tempers rose, and the argument spun out of control. At some point, someone smashed a glass-domed clock over Stilts' head, swelling one of his eyes shut. Stilts retreated to his bedroom and came back holding a .38 caliber revolver. During the struggle, the gun went off once and nearly hit his 14-year-old stepson, Tom Corrigan. Then came the shot that ended everything. According to Stilts, Switzer pulled a knife and said, "I'm going to kill you." So Stilts fired again. The bullet hit Switzer in the groin and severed an artery. His reported last words were heartbreaking in their simplicity. "What did you shoot me for?" A closed penknife was later found under his body. He bled to death before reaching the hospital. He was only 31. 4 days later, a coroner's jury ruled it justifiable homicide. Stilts cried on the stand and said, "Alfie charged me with a jackknife. I was forced to shoot." For years, that stood as the accepted version. Then, in January 2001, Tom Corrigan spoke publicly and told a very different story. More than 40 years had passed, but he said the shooting looked much more like murder than self-defense. According to Corrigan, Switzer and Piot were actually trying to leave when Stilts fired the fatal shot. He also said an LAPD detective had interviewed him at the time, but he was never called to testify. Former Our Gang cast members had long doubted Carl would ever pull a knife on anyone. And when the so-called hunting knife turned out to be only a small penknife, those doubts grew even stronger. In another bitter twist, Switzer died on the same day as Cecil B. DeMille, so the news barely made the papers. It was a cold final irony, especially since his last film credit had been in DeMille's The Ten Commandments. He was buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and his tombstone reads, "Beloved Father, Son, and Brother." Yet the strangest detail of all may have come later. Every Christmas, right up until Stilts died in 1983, an anonymous card arrived at his home, signed only with one word, Alfie. Then there was Billy Thomas, the boy the world knew as Buckwheat. He was born on March 12, 1931, in Los Angeles, and appeared in about 92 Our Gang shorts between 1934 and 1944. That made him the only cast member to appear in all 52 of the MGM-produced entries. He started at $40 a week, which was modest compared with some of the others, but his family handled his earnings differently. They invested 10% of everything he made in United States savings bonds, a small decision that showed rare caution in a